All right, if we could get that slide up there that has the phone number and the web address, that would be great. Once again, what we'll be doing is doing a Q&A time. We have about 25, 30 minutes of Q&A time. So if you have any questions, you can use the same text number that we did before. That number will be up on the screen, but if you don't have it, it is 216-200-8546. Once again, that number is 216-200-8546. There's also a web address that you can use if you'd want to. Feel free to send in text or the web questions. And so while we're waiting for those to come in, Dr. Kevin, I'm just happy to get an opportunity to be up here and hear you speak, first of all. And as someone who found so much benefit from what you had said, I just want to know, how long did it take for all of this process to come out of you? Can you tell me a little bit of the journey that got you to where you're at today and some of the things that you said here to us today?
Well, it's a 53-year journey. One of the things that God has done with me over the years is, I don't want to say I'm proud to say this, but I've always been a misfit. And because I've never really fit anywhere, I've fit everywhere. So I've had a diversity of experiences. As Peter said, I was a police officer for a season, business owner right out of college. I've taught seminary, I've pastored now, and run nonprofits now. So I've seen a lot of spaces and a lot of environments, and I think that by and large has shaped everything about me as a peacemaker.
Awesome. Court, you shared a story of redemption and how God is redeeming certain aspects in your life. How does that work in terms of your working with your employees too? Are you able to disciple them and take what you learn and from a redemption standpoint and pull that down into your employees also?
Yes, I mean, it's an opportunity that I take pretty seriously, and part of that's just by being transparent. I mean, when those things happen, this process that we're in right now, I mean, I had to go and ask my employees for forgiveness because I hadn't given them bandwidth, because I wasn't loving them the way that I was supposed to. And, regardless of that, whether that was me personally or my management team, it was me personally, because I'm the one who's responsible for that before God. And so that starts that process of letting them know that, look, we're all in this process of redemption. This is part of what it is for me, and then allows me to kind of have that opportunity for them. And I've had, a couple different employees come in and go, okay, what's that really mean? And how does that really work? And what if I kind of want that? And how do I go about that? So, yeah.
Great. The question was asked, and I kind of asked that to Dr. Kevin about how did you get to where you're at now, but let me ask you the same question. Just give us a brief synopsis of your past that brought you to the place where you're at today.
I was brought into this kicking and screaming. I was in Bible college, had no desire. I left my family business to go to Bible college, planned to be a pastor. A number of things happened. My brother was killed. Found out I couldn't be credentialed because I was previously married. And all of a sudden, I'm kind of wondering what I'm going to do with my life. And my parents had gotten involved with an organization called Fellowship of Companies for Christ International. They invited me back into the company, said, we want to make it a platform for ministry and run it according to biblical principles. And they said, would you consider coming back in? And I said, I don't want to, but God wasn't opening any other doors. And so I came back in, and God's used that path to open up, first of all, my understanding of ministry. At that point, I would have never said that, once you're saved, you're in full-time ministry. I understood it very differently, and that was that was a redeeming experience for me.
Court, the question has been asked also, in loving your employees, have you considered having paid chaplains on your staff? They give the example of the Coca-Cola bottling company. to help with like marriage, relationships, funerals, those types of things?
I'm blessed that I don't necessarily have to pay one, because a very dear friend of mine who's pastored a church in Chesterland for 35 years comes over and does that every week. He's there, his wife is our secretary, and so he functions in that role, and yeah, we take that pretty seriously.
Awesome. The question was also asked, Court, what is the process that you have God to reveal areas that he seeks to redeem in your life and in your business?
Quietness. So I'll take probably a minimum of 1 day a month. I'll go somewhere, I leave my cell phone, I leave everything behind, and I'll spend 6 to 8 hours just trying to shut my mind off and trying to be as quiet as possible and just listen. And sometimes it's excruciatingly painful because our minds just don't like doing that. They don't like shutting off. But I don't know about most of you, but I don't hear God screaming at me very often. I have to get really, really, really quiet. And again, a lot of times that's 4 to 5 hours of just trying to shut my mind down. But that's what's most effective for me.
The question was also asked, Court, how do you convince your managers to let you tithe, especially on gross sales instead of profits? And how did that conversation go?
Well,
a little more detail, I think, that went behind the scenes.
To be fair, they're managers and I'm an owner, so. Yeah. I wasn't asking their permission, it was a rhetorical question. But that's serious. But you know what, they were really angry. And what I did was I understood that, and I agree. My thing was I empathized with them. I understand you're really angry, and you're rightfully angry. You're feeling like something was robbed from you, and you have every right to feel that way. I'm not going to take that away from you. What I'm going to ask, though, is that you kind of contain that and not let it spread in the company, and let's see what God does with this. And you know what? They did. They honored that, and it's a pretty amazing turnaround when 2 months later you're paying everybody bonuses. And again, there's just certain things God can do that we can't. I could have spent 10 years preaching to him, and no way could I have preached to him that well. So
let me ask a follow-up question, and this is for me. Just did that help lead into conversations about faith with these other people that may not be in the same position that you are at in your faith?
It has. I would love to say they are now all, prolific believers in church, and they aren't. They're still, they have more faith now than they did. And I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful for that. But they each have their own journey to walk. And, that's one where I'm very careful in how I press on those issues, because I need it to be their issue. I think those of us with children see, it's like, there's times you really want to jam it down, but, it's their journey. They have to walk it.
Very good. Dr. Kevin, how did you come to the place of having millennials as mentorees, if you will? And did they approach you? Did you approach them? And how did you start that process? And how did that process all come about?
Boundary crossing. So I've been very intentional about reaching out to them. So I actually called, made appointments with them. But the neat thing that God did with that is that about 6 of them are not seminary trained. They've not had much formal education in that way. But without fail, they all saw the value of what I could do to help their congregations and more so help them. And so over the years, we've just continued to develop those relationships. And the wonderful thing is they've invited my wife and myself into those spaces and to help not simply mentor the pastors, but also the congregations. And that's been tremendously enriching. And so, as a matter of fact, we're birthing some other citywide initiatives to help facilitate that even more.
So what does that look like, I guess, in the picture of when you're sitting down with these young men and ladies or whatever, whoever they are that come to you and you cross that boundary and have that relationship with them? What does that look like? How did you start that conversation, and where does it go, on a daily basis? If you can just give us a little bit of a snapshot of what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, well, consistency is the main thing, and so they know that they can call me anytime. We can talk about anything, and I'm going to give them the real deal. They know, I've been at this for almost 30 years now, so they value the experience that I bring as well. They know, I have 5 degrees, and so they know my formal education as well. But more often than not, it's in crisis or questioning situations that they find themselves in, and they just want somebody they trust to walk them through it. So I've been consistent. I meet weekly with all of them, not all in the same week. And, that's just part of the normal routine and rhythm.
So on the question of boundaries and crossing the boundaries, love that idea. Sometimes, though, when crossing that boundary, we're a little nervous about doing it because we don't know what's on the other side, right? That's the idea of a boundary. How did you prepare yourself and get yourself to a point of crossing those boundaries and making it a regular practice?
Hear this in the right spirit, y'all. God called me to be a missionary to white Christians a while back. Because I find that there are so many difficult conversations that we refuse to have because there are not enough people who are willing to step into spaces that make them uncomfortable. I've done that, so I can, I'm talking the talk because I'm walking the walk as well. Whether racially, denominationally, culturally, one of the seminaries I teach at, is welcoming and affirming seminary. And folks ask me, well, how can you do it? Well, that's part of my mission field. And if I'm not there with a balanced perspective on how they can see things, they'll never hear any other perspective other than those who would fit in that environment. So I think we just have to be willing to do it and then actually take the step into those spaces. That's the only way. We have to choose to do that.
Sure. Court, the question was asked is how has God called some of your leaders or employees to believe in Christ based on seeing the signs of his blessings?
Yeah, not nearly as many as I'd like, but yeah, we've had probably, let's see, about 6 in the last 5 years. One that was just amazing though, and just quick story because it's my favorite. When we were a little bit smaller, we're at about 100 people now. When we were a little bit smaller, I used to take everybody out for lunch. And if I did that now, I'd gain 10 pounds a week, so I had to stop that. But I took this lady. She was emigrated here from the Ukraine, and we're sitting at lunch, and as I asked all my employees, do you mind if I pray? And it was the first time she goes, yes. And I thought I heard it right, but I was just like, did you say you might? Yes, I might. Okay. So we're having lunch, and she's kind of like, she's telling me, she says, well, the reason I don't, she goes, I came here to the United States, and this was really eye-opening for me. She came to the United States because she was being persecuted in the Ukraine for living with her boyfriend. And I didn't realize their culture was that strict, but it's pretty, Orthodox religion strict. And so she said, I came here so I could be free from that, and I don't want anything to do with religion at all. And I said, Yelena, you don't have to explain to me. I said, that's why I ask. I said, I would never do anything, against you. But about 1.5 years later, through a couple of our employees and through a few things that she and I had to talk about, she came to know the Lord. And it was one of those where she came and she's like, she actually apologized. She said, I am so sorry for not allowing you to pray. She said, I know that your heart was right. So it was,
Court, you have a book out on the table as well.
I do.
Can you tell us the title and just a little bit about that?
It's called Winning at Work, and it was really birthed at a time when we were really endeavoring to be a company that ran according to biblical principles, to really be a platform to ministry, to really treat our employees well, and to really benefit them well. I have to be careful that how I say love them now, because we're in that process. But I would share this with people, and so many believers would, oh my gosh, man, I wish I worked for your company because my company stinks and my boss stinks and my coworkers stink and this is this and this is that. And it feeds your ego, because I'm thinking, yeah, we really have a great company, and wouldn't it be great if we were bigger, and everybody doing devotions again. And God's kind of like, you're not the answer. It's not really what I wanted to hear. And he said, really, he said, it's their attitude towards work. He said, their work hasn't been redeemed. He said, they're not working for the right reasons. They're not working for me. And so this whole thing started percolating, and I was at an event with a ministry, and I was talking about this with the head of the ministry, and he's like, man, you need to write a book about that. And I said, I don't write, I speak. And he said, guess what? I'm a journalism major. And he said, would you like to do that? And so that's what we sat down. And so really, it kind of tells my story, but it kind of brings about that biblical perspective of work, what God designed it for. Revelatory to me at the time that work existed before sin. Even as a Bible college graduate, it's just something that hadn't entered my mind. I was just thinking work was a product of sin. No, it was the difficulty of work existed beforehand. So that's kind of the basic premise of the book.
Dr. Kevin, you mentioned the new configurations of the millennial congregations. Can you tell us what you would say are the biggest differences today for that? And then can you tell us a little bit about your congregation? Is your congregation leading that way? Is it somewhere in the middle, or where are you at in that kind of process?
Yeah, so when I gave myself completely to the city work that I'm doing, we actually closed our congregation that we planted 13 years ago, so we give ourselves fully to that. So my congregation is really more the city, now the world is my parish kind of idea. One of the things that I've noticed with millennials, and I do listen to them intently, because I think, old men dream dreams, these young guys have visions. And I'm trying to pay attention, because they have the answers to what comes next. What they need more than anything is for us to create some open field running and move people out of the way so they can do what they do. Millennials are not necessarily anti-institution, but if the institution is not serving the purpose of life and growth, they don't want anything to do with it. So one of the young men is leading what he calls the Garden Church, and they meet in 6 different locations. Co-working space is one of them, restaurant, pub is another one. They have these non-traditional spaces that they gather just to pray together, worship together, and then they go their separate ways. And they network throughout the week as a way of doing church together. So very non-structured, non-traditional. They're not hung up on buildings. They're not hung up on our formal liturgies, many of them, with one exception. There's one who is kind of this new wave liturgical guy. He loves, smells and bells and all that stuff. But most of them, they just want to do church. They want to be church together in their everyday lives, and they don't see the separation between their work life and church life and the school life and all.
That's great. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the common practical collaborative inner city things that congregations are doing in the Columbus area, and maybe some ideas that we could think about in the Cleveland area?
I mentioned the Co-Mission Fund, which is significant because we're inviting the Church of Columbus. By the way, we have started to reframe language and stop talking about church as congregation, but Church of Columbus includes Marketplace, Parachurch, and congregation. And so as we've been doing that, we've created a Co-Mission Fund to give people a very tangible way to invest in the kingdom collaboratively as we're moving together. One of the other big things is we have a number of very neutral convening influences like Catalyst, there's a Mission Columbus, and we all collaborate together to provide kind of the engine behind the citywide movement that's underway. So I think that's almost necessary because all business people, all pastors have things that are their priority. Somebody needs to be paying attention to the broader movement and to put legs and feet to it.
The other question was, are there projects that lend to drawing generations together in a church that can be spun out to bless the community surrounding outside of the church?
Back to the co-working space, and in fact, the Garden Church and the co-working space are both approaching ministry from a business incubation perspective, as opposed to a strict discipleship, read a book, pray together kind of thing. So they're actually thinking about what will be produced in the marketplace and not simply their own personal and spiritual growth, which is included, but it's not the only point of it. They're also including in that training opportunities, not just in Bible and theology stuff, but everything from resume writing to interviewing to starting businesses to accounting, taking care of businesses. I mean, all of these things, they're thinking more holistically about what life means for them as Christians.
You have mentioned Catalyst a couple times. Someone asked if you could just explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, so Catalyst for Columbus is just the nonprofit that I lead, and we exist solely to help the Church of Columbus move together in the city. So the bulk of my time is spent nurturing relationships with pastors and business leaders in the city, parachurch leaders in the city, to get them to think about the Church of Columbus and not simply their own piece of that.
Court, the question was asked, have you had an opportunity to work with other business leaders or owners that are on the same level as you are and share some of the things that are happening at your company and seeing an impact being made there?
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's gone on for years. Fellowship of Companies for Christ International was that. That's gone through some iterations, and I'm not as actively involved, but even, through Jim Surace, I mean, just different people that God puts in my path. And that's something I'm always looking for is, who's doing the same, who can we encourage one another, how can we share ideas, what works in one place, what doesn't work, I mean, those types of things, those are incredibly important. So yeah, I'm always on the lookout for that.
Okay, I think that's it. Yep, we're good. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.